Thank you so much for tuning in as we talk a little bit today about why are we changing the name of our church from Immanuel Church to Freedom Church. Let's start by saying what's in a name. Some of you call me Pastor. Some of you call me Pastor Roger. Some of you call me Raj. Some of you just say, hey, you. Some of you even call me by the name that's on my business card, J. Roger Ball. It doesn't matter to me what you call me. If I know you and you know me, you can just say, hey, you. But the reality is that there is something in a name, and there's something behind why we have considered to change the name of our church to Freedom Church. Well, when I talk history, I'm talking about the history of our name change. I became pastor actually in June. It will be 15 years ago that I became the senior pastor from having served for 8 years as the youth pastor or student pastor of our church. And when I first became the pastor, there was some talk from some others and some questions around and even thoughts in my mind about getting a fresh start, getting a new start as a church. And we toyed with the idea, a few of us, about changing the name, but decided at that time it was not probably prudent to do so. Over the years, there have been a few other times that thought has come up into my mind, and as I thought about it and dreamed about it and talked to others about it, there were a couple of different church names that came into my mind that I said, would describe the church to a community that doesn't go to church, and that's what has driven a lot of this. Well, several weeks ago, I was at breakfast with somebody who has just recently started to become a part of our church, and we were talking about all kinds of things, and in our conversation, they said something to me about, that they had often thought if they ever started a church or planted a church, and our conversation was going along those lines anyway, because I was sharing with this man that our vision is to plant life groups, small groups in homes that eventually plant churches throughout our community so that we are a church in many different kinds of expressions. And he looked at me and he said, I've always thought this. I thought if I started a church, I would call it Freedom Church. Well, I just kind of took a deep breath because that was one of the two names that I had often given consideration to. So I thought about it over a couple of weeks, and we were getting ready to have a meeting with our elders, our board of trustees, and all of our life group leaders, past and present. And I thought, why not, at that meeting, just float this idea, since it just seemed to naturally transpire, float this idea about a name change. Well, what happened at that meeting shocked even me. Right after I laid out this idea and told this group of people that were meeting in my home what had transpired at that breakfast, all of a sudden one of our elders responded first, and he looked at me and said, well, it's about time. And that took me by surprise because he and I had never, even over the years, had any conversation about changing the name of the church. And I went to find out that had been something that had been on his mind and his heart for some time as well. And then little by little, there was such enthusiasm going on in the room from so many of the people that I began to think, okay, well, maybe this is where God is leading us and directing us and guiding us. Now, I don't expect everybody is going to be as excited as some of the people were in that room. In fact, not all the people in the room were all that excited, but nobody seemed to have any real negative reaction at the time. And so we just began to commit this thing to prayer and to talk about it and to begin to reflect on should we do it or not do it, and if we did do it, why would we do it, and what things did we need to take into consideration in doing it. And so that process began with our church staff. And over a period of several weeks, as we prayed and as we talked, our church staff came to a unanimous conclusion that this was the right thing for us to do, and this was the right time for us to do it. So our staff made a recommendation then to the elders in regard to changing the name of the church from Immanuel Church to Freedom Church. Then the next step would be that the elders would meet and discuss the matter, pray about the matter, and make a decision. The elders' decision was that we would be in agreement, in unity with those on our church staff who felt strongly and passionately about the name change. Why would we do this? Why would we change our name after all these years from Immanuel Church? Well, first of all, know that we've really been by three names in our history of our church, beginning with Vero Beach Baptist Chapel. That was the first name of the church. Later it became Immanuel Baptist Church, and then ultimately Immanuel Church, as we realized from research and things that we had done that for many people the word Baptist, the very people we were trying to reach in our community, those who don't go to church anywhere, those who have never gone to church somewhere, that the word Baptist had a negative connotation to them, according to many surveys, even those by our own Southern Baptist Convention, to people. And we wanted to remove any hindrance that there might be, so that we might reach these people and we might increase and build the kingdom of God here in Vero Beach and the surrounding area around us. And honestly, that's what motivates even this change to Freedom Church. The reality is this: we're not trying to attract people from other churches. We're not trying to get people that go to this church over here or this church over here to come to our church. And so what we're targeting and what we're doing is we're looking at the surrounding area around us, and we're targeting those who don't go to church and those who have never been to church. And among those people, the word Immanuel has little or no meaning. In fact, among the majority of them, I believe that if you asked them, what does Immanuel mean, they would not really be able to answer that. And though it's a beautiful meaning, it means God with us. It appears 5 times in the scriptures. It has different spellings even in the scripture, and that makes some difficulty. Some of you who go to our church and been going for 2 years still misspell our name when you write your check. It's okay. We still get it cashed, and your money still goes into the purposes that God has intended for the mission of our church. But we know that name has some difficulty in the very people that we are attempting to reach here in our community. And our feeling is that the word freedom, a very scriptural, a very biblical term, says who we are. It says what our ministry is all about, as we have strong ties to recovery ministry and seeing people's lives set free. It has a very tie to Jesus's declared purpose, that he came to set the captives free. We feel as a staff that this is the right thing for our church to do at this time. As I was doing my due diligence and research on the idea of changing the name of the church, of course I realized that there would potentially be some people that weren't excited about it, maybe some people who even opposed the idea, and that comes with the territory. That's to be expected. The only thing that I've asked through this process is that as we make this final decision, as we take these final steps in that regard, that we would be unified by the mission of the church and not divided over the name of the church. The mission of our church is to make disciples who make disciples, and that doesn't change. We are doing this simply because we believe it's going to help us to reach more in our efforts, that we can disciple, to be disciples who make disciples. And so we have asked that not be, but I couldn't help but reflect back on when we got the property that we're on. We originally had purchased 10 acres in another part of our community, and it was in a part that had houses around it, but it was on a dirt road and kind of a little bit out of the way, and And we had somebody come along who suggested that that's probably not the best place for us to locate, to be in a higher traffic place. And so we ended up with the 20 acres out here on 58th Avenue where we currently are. And it was controversial at the time because, frankly, there were no houses around except for a couple that were on the south side of our property. It was kind of across the street from nowhere, and yet if you look today at what God has done, in fact, here statistically is where God has brought this church. Since 1990, when we had purchased the property and we'd begun to build the building, since 1990, the population of the United States has grown by 26%. The population of the larger part of Indian River County has grown by 37%, but the 1 mile radius around our location has grown by over 300%. And the plans that are on the books today, they tell us that there are more developments in the pipeline, more houses coming, more families coming. And so in doing our research and planning this name change, we began to look at that, and lo and behold, the statistics and the research of the demographics in this area that is around the church tell us that while over the next 5 years Indian River County is projected to grow by 5%, the area 1 mile radius around our church is projected to grow by 20%. The other thing that caught our attention and we believe supports the idea of changing the name of the church, the age group that is moving into the 1 mile radius around our church is significantly younger than the rest of Indian River County. This area is expected to have way more families who are two-parent families with children. And that is also going to mean that there are a lot of people that are in our area that probably have not grown up in the church culture that some of us did. So we're looking at those kinds of things. The other thing that was kind of above average for us that really caught our attention is that the 1 mile radius around our church seems to be isolated and very different than so many other parts of Indian River County as far as diversity goes. There's this diversity and there's this variety, and we see that reflected in our church. We also see that there is a diversity of different denominational backgrounds. I think that's why we see that in our church. And we stress in our church over and over that whom the Son sets free is free indeed. And we even talk about in our doctrine that there are essentials, but in the non-essentials that we have freedom, that we have liberty. That's how a church dwells in unity. It doesn't become legalistic about certain things that really don't matter. And so please, church, don't become legalistic about the name of our church, but rejoice in what God is doing as we move forward in this decision-making process. As always, I welcome your input. I welcome your questions. I prefer to sit down one-on-one with you and discuss these things. That's why I've made this video today, so at least you could see my face, even though I can't see your face in that regard. Let's not email each other. Let's not Facebook each other. Let's talk one with another. If you have questions, if you have concerns, if you have things that maybe you think, they haven't thought about this, come to us. Maybe we have, maybe we haven't. But let's talk about this. Most of all, let's join together and let's unite ourselves on this. We're not here about the name of the church. We're here about the mission that God has given us. The mission of we make disciples who make disciples. Let's be difference makers. Let's dream big. Let's be exponential in our thinking, and let's be exponential in our love for one another. God bless you.